Right. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing great. Thank you so much for joining in. And I hope you're all having like a great day ahead. This is Zanab Kamran. I am from DreamBridge. I am the growth lead there. And as you all know, like DreamBridge is basically it's an AI powered platform whereby you can, see certain guidances. You can we help you connect with the right people. We help you give guidance over your US applications. So if you're a student right now studying and you want to pursue higher education in the US, or maybe you're in your early career, so join in. I've also attached our links. We have a YouTube channel, as you can see. I've pinned it, and we also have school community. I'd be sharing the link for that after 30 to 35 minutes. But do feel to check this out and subscribe. And by the way, if you are, if you're planning to study in the US, and let's say you want to check your eligibility for loan funding, we have a link here as well for Empower. So, you know, uh, just feel free to check this out as well. And for today's guests, as many of you know, we have Sannan. Sannan is an amazing dude. He's working at Meta, and before that, he was working at PJT. So he has pivoted from banking and consulting, and sort of he was working in the advisory space. And from there, he pivoted to tech. This is such an interesting transition. We don't really see that happening that much. And he's also studied from the US. He did his undergrad in political science and economics, and he was at Swarthmore. That is a liberal arts college. Sorry if I mispronounced the university though. Did I?
That's completely right. Swarthmore.
Swarthmore, right. Great, great. I remember you also did, the speech there, and which was great. Like I remember this like from a few years though. Yeah.
Yes, I was one of the two graduation speakers from my class, which
Right.
was a
That,
big honor. I feel like for me it
yeah,
was the best
definitely.
way of saying goodbye to my college.
Definitely, definitely. And before that, he was at JT, and he was also, doing all these MUNs. He was in the council. So yeah, how are you doing, Sanan? How have you been?
I'm doing really well. That's a very flattering introduction. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. Very happy to be here, and it's great to hear all the work you guys do. I feel like when I was applying to college, it would have been incredibly helpful to have something like this, the tool you guys have, or just any guidance available. So happy to be a resource to anyone who needs it.
Thank you so much. So let's begin. Let's dive a little deeper back when you were applying to your university, right? You back imagine like let's say you're still in A levels during that time. How did you sort of figure out the kind of activities that you need to do? How did you sort of figure out the kind of grades that you need to do? And but imagine like after you had that perfect like SAT score, you had your profile ready. Why did you decide to go to a liberal arts school over others?
Yeah. So just in terms of activities, I feel like most of the activities I ended up putting down on my activity list were things I had done way before I thought I was going to apply to the US. So I
Right.
had done things like squash, debates, dramatics. इस तरह की जितनी भी चीजें थी were all things I had been doing since grade 9 or even before that. Um, so which I think is important because you want to be able to do things that you're genuinely passionate about rather than just like doing things so you can put them down on an activity list. So I was doing several activities. By the end of my O3, when a lot of my seniors were applying to college, and I was like, okay, this is also an option available to all of us. That's probably when I first thought that I could also go to the US, because that's also when my brother was applying to the US. And he would have been the first person from my immediate family to go abroad for his undergrad. And that's when I was like, okay, it's an option that we can consider. That's when I learned about financial aid, about all the colleges available to us. And at the start of my A1 would be when I would have really thought that this is something I have a shot at. Um, and then when my friends were applying, I was thinking through my activity, my university list, and I personally think I would have gone for UPenn for no particular reason. I never had a dream university, a place I really wanted to be at. I knew I wanted to study something related to political science, IR, economics, sociology. Those were the kinds of topics I was interested in. Those were the things I was studying in my O levels and my A levels. Um, but, and that's so ironic that back in 2018, 2019, there was a TLP protest, exactly like we have one today, basically, and
Right.
my SAT 2 was cancelled. And so I couldn't take the SAT subject tests. And as someone who has a Pakistani passport, is looking for financial aid, even though I could have technically applied to any of the IVs without the SAT subject twos, the SAT subject tests, it would have been just unreasonable to expect an admission without them. And so I was like, okay, then I'll look for some liberal arts colleges. And Swarthmore I knew was great for both economics and political science. And so I ended up applying to Swarthmore in the early cycle, which I recommend everyone to do, and got in. So that's the only place I applied to and thankfully
Really?
got in. Yeah.
Great. That's great. That's really lucky. And how did you apply for like financial aid? What were your steps basically? Because we hear a lot of myths around that, right? We
Yeah.
hear that like let's say like liberal arts school, they're not that generous with
Yeah.
financial aid, right? So how did you sort of curate and we sort
Yeah.
of maneuver
So in
through
fact,
that?
the first step of my university list was just filtering American universities by which ones offer financial aid and which ones don't, because that's the subset I knew I was working with. And the decision was, if it's a place I can't afford, then I would rather stay in Pakistan, and then go to the US for my master's, or when I get a scholarship later on in life. And so I knew my counselor gave me like a sense of which colleges gave financial aid, and I knew that Swarthmore had a commitment to meeting 100% of the demonstrated need, which means I could be asking for, say, $80,000 a year, but they will look at my financial documents, and if they think I deserve 65, that's the aid they will give me. And
Right.
inversely, I could be asking for $30,000, but if they think I deserve more, they will still give me what they think I deserve based on my documents. So there used to be a document, I forget what the name of the document is, but you fill out all of your financial details. It's a really, really detailed document. You're putting down all sources of income, all expenses, even expenses like how much do you spend on travel each year, how many cars do you have in the house, all of these things. You put all of that down, and then the college comes up with the number they think is reasonable, and then they keep adjusting that number based on your family's circumstances as well as things like exchange rate changes. Um, that's how it worked for me.
Great, great, great. Right. And moving on, like when you were at Swarthmore, right? So how was it like, studying there? And then how did you sort of like you knew that, you want to get into let's say consulting or banking or whatever field.
Yeah,
How was networking like, considering,
yeah,
the
yeah. So
patient and
Swarthmore
yes.
Yeah. So Swarthmore was great for me. I knew that it was a small college, and I had a sense that that's the kind of place I want to be at. So my entire college had about 1,600 people, 400 people per class year. So really, really small, almost the size of my high school, maybe smaller than that actually. So what that means is you get to know everyone really quickly, and you don't feel lost or alien the way you might at a much bigger university.
Mhm.
I love that. On the academic front, I feel like because it's so small, you really get one-on-one attention from the professors. Some of my classes were 8 students with a professor. It's a 4-hour long seminar class, and you're just like discussing ideas, which was great for the kinds of things I was studying, economics, political science, because the classes are like very discussion based. Maybe it's not as good for someone who needs more resources, someone who's studying, let's say, engineering or CS or something like that. But for what I wanted to do, Swartner was great. Even on the economic side, I feel like each college has their like special thing that they focus on. So Wharton might be finance, Chicago might be like pre-market economics. Swarthmore's focus, I think, is public policy, economic development kind of economics, and that's again
Mhm.
exactly what I wanted to study. Um, so like from the academic front, from the social point of view, A was great. I think the best thing that happened to me in my first semester was that the first semester was pass fail. उसका फायदा ये था कि I could take things that I was curious about but wasn't great at. So I took courses in peace and conflict studies, which is like a mix of political science, anthropology. It was actually a course on Israel Palestine. I took classes in
Great.
CS. I took like upper level economics classes, just to experiment because I could. Because the worst that could have happened was I mean, technically I could have failed the class, but realistically I would have just passed with a low score, and that doesn't matter. Um, उसका दूसरा फायदा ये था कि because my um, GPA didn't matter. I could focus on like making friends. अगर अगले हफ्ते मेरा midterm है, लेकिन मेरे दोस्त कहीं और जा रहे हैं, तो I can afford to go hang out with my friends. And that's really important in the first semester because that's your like अभी आप नए एक जगह में आए हो, एक नए मुल्क में आए हो, and you want to make friends at that point. और उसका तीसरा फायदा ये था कि no one was trying to compete with each other. And almost all of us were from hyper competitive high schools. Um, and when you're in a college together and suddenly no one cares about their GPA, it sets the tone for a very collaborative college experience as opposed to a very competitive college experience. And I think that culture stays on for the rest of my time at Swarthmore. It was really, really collaborative. People want the best for you. Your peers are not trying to compete with you. So even when the time came around to um, the job applications, all of my peers, my seniors, my juniors, everyone was trying to help me out, and I was doing the same for them. So it was really really nice. To your other point about how like when I was thinking about the job application part of it, for the first 2.5 years, I really wasn't thinking of consulting or finance. I was very
Mhm.
focused on public policy kind of things. In my first summer, which is summer of 2020, COVID bala summer, I was working for a podcast called Asia Matters with a couple of BBC, Wall Street Journal journalists. I was working for think tanks in Pakistan, Islamabad में Strategic Studies Institute है. I was working for think tanks in the US as a research assistant. Still very focused on public policy type चीजें. दूसरे साल में भी I was working for the mayor's office in Philadelphia on like city level politics or policies कि हम plastic bags को वो उस time पे ban कर रहे थे. So you're doing an economic analysis of is the policy worth it, उसका क्या फायदा होगा. But then in my third year, when the internship like the junior year internship cycle came around, um, then I was like, I will take my shot with consulting and finance. And if I get an internship, then that's great. If not,
Mhm.
I still have the think tanks application cycle later on. Uski application February, April में थी. Consulting की applications October, November में थी. Um, the prior year. So I took my shot. And then I was also like, I need to find a place that's going to sponsor my H-1B visa, that's going to accept me as an international student, and not a lot of think tanks, small NGOs would have the capacity or the finances to do that. So उस time पे I was looking for all kinds of consulting positions, all kinds of finance positions. A lot of my peers do this networking process way early on compared to what I did. So but I started doing it in my late sophomore, early junior year. And then PJT was kind of I had like sent out hundreds of applications of time pay. I remember like looking through my cover letters. I had like 40 different cover letters, many other applications without the cover letter, just trying to focus on the volume of my applications and hoping a few of them work out. I went through the interview process for all of them and landed PJT and just did the internship with them.
Great. So talk a little bit about, your application, sort of how do you optimize your CV, the cover letter, and what were the interview questions like, or even the whole like interview process like? If you could just quickly, shed light on that.
Yeah. So for the places I really wanted to work at, so BCG, for example, was one of them. I would try to connect with someone who has already worked there and get a sense of what's the day-to-day look like. Or it's an important part because a lot of people would tell me what the company does or what their little team does, and they wouldn't exactly tell me what they do. There was one 9 बजे दफ्तर जाते हैं वो जाके क्या करते हैं. And I feel like that's the important thing I wanted to pick up on. Okay, what skills do I need to show in my application to be able to do the job you're doing? Because often what they were telling me were things that the directors or the VPs were doing. कि हम clients को advise करते हैं. But the advice is that really coming from the director. The analyst is the one looking through the data, making the slide deck. So that's one thing I would get a sense of. कि लोग actually करते क्या हैं. The other thing would be just like point blank asking them, what skills do I need to highlight? Because when I'm going through my interview prep, I would think of all the kinds of questions they can ask me. And there's like a standard way consulting and finance interviews work. उसमें कुछ technical सवाल होंगे. If it's a finance interview, they will ask you, walk me through a discounted cash flow model, three statements kaise kaam karti hain. If it's a consulting, they will have a case interview. Um, and the common thing across these interviews are behavioral questions, which are
Mhm.
something like, tell me about a time. And then they will ask you something like, tell me about a time when you learned something new, when you failed at something, when you worked with the team, when you had a disagreement, is tarah ke. And I would like prepare my answers to all of these questions. I would like have a document ready. Or usme I would make sure that the stories I was telling would highlight the skills that they were looking for. If they're looking for someone who has demonstrated an ability to handle multiple projects at the same time, I would say something like, I was taking the courses I was taking at the college, the extracurriculars I was doing, if I was doing a job, just to show the skills that they're looking for are things I've already done. So that's what I did. The PJT interview was seven different interviews with different levels, mostly behavioral interviews because it's a very niche thing. They don't expect people to know, okay, shareholder advisory kya hoti hai, corporate governance kya hoti hai. No one really learns that in college. They expected me to know what the firm broadly does, and I obviously read up on it.
Mhm.
But that's broadly what they asked me about, just like behavioral questions.
Right. Great. Great. And so now, like, you're in PJT working, right? What made you shift to tech? How did that happen?
The shift was I had to leave the US when my OPT ran out. मेरा एक साल के लिए मैं अमेरिका में काम कर सकता था. I was still on the student visa, and the way it works is कि अगर आप if you're on a student visa and you're employed and your employer is willing to sponsor your OPT, your H-1B visa, you enter a lottery, and then it's a 10 to 15% chance of winning the lottery. Um, before Trump announced his recent changes. और उसमें I didn't win the lottery, which meant I had to pack up my bags and leave and go back to Pakistan or find another place to live and work. And so that's why PJT ended. Or those times I was looking for two kinds of um, positions. I was either looking for the standard consulting route in the Middle East, the Dubai ke andar BCG, McKinsey, Bain mein apply karna, or other like public policy consulting firms. Or I knew that a lot of large tech companies in Singapore have their offices here, the Google ka office, TikTok ka, Meta ka, and I knew people who had worked here in the past. And that's the other kind of position I was looking for, a non-software engineering position at tech companies in Singapore, which is the one I ended up doing.
Great, great. So how did you sort of, prepare for that? I'm sure the skill set that this job required is, I'm sure like it
Yeah.
would be at least in some way, different from what you were doing at PJT. So how did you
Yeah.
prepare for everything? And again, considering, you were at a time crunch where you just like had 1 year and then you had to sort of, go
Yeah.
ahead, right, and move
Yeah.
on.
I would say that the industries broadly look,
Uh-huh.
sorry, you got cut off, Zainab. Sorry, you got cut off at the end.
Yeah. I'm saying I just had to like confirm, were you on OPT or OPT STEM? Since
I was
you
on
mentioned
OPT.
it.
So I had the
Right,
1 year OPT, not the 3 year OPT.
right, right,
Because my college didn't consider econ to be a STEM degree. And that's like just on colleges. Kuch colleges karte hain, kuch nahi karte.
right.
Um, so I would say the industries broadly look very different. Obviously, finance, consulting versus tech. But on a day-to-day level, what a junior person in both of these industries is doing is not all that different. There will be some basic data analysis work. There will be some project management, product management kind of work. A lot of the skills they're looking for will be very general things. Okay, can you work with different teams? Can you pick up a new skill, a new task, and navigate the ambiguity that comes with it? The very general things. I looked up online के इस job का interview process क्या होगा. The HR also shared that it will have a critical thinking interview, a market knowledge interview, and a working at Meta interview, which is about essentially again behavioral questions exactly like the ones I had already answered. So I just went through I made like a 17-page document trying to think of all the potential questions they could ask me, listing down my answers, and writing them down in the way I want to say it in the call, just rehearsing it and going through it.
Right, great. And talk a little bit about like the skill sets, how did you sort of did you learn it? I know like, when you joined Meta, you
Yeah.
had like this whole training period. So talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So even before joining, I knew that data analysis would be a big part of it. Like data querying would be a part of it. So I looked up SQL. I joined a कोई जो online course था Udemy पे या कहीं Coursera pay. So I was trying to learn SQL. I didn't get too far into the course, but that's another skill I was trying to pick up. I knew okay, the first 6 months at the job will be just training. So I knew going in, okay, they will upskill me on all these things they want me to learn. And I spoke to my manager before joining, okay, it's a completely new thing to me. So what do I need to know? And he was like, a lot of the things you will end up doing are things that uh, will require you to use internal tools, and you can only practice them once you get onboarded. The onboard hone ke baad, I would look up all the tools. So the internal ways of writing code, for example, we use some AI, we use some like projects that have already existed. Um, और क्योंकि इतने सालों से Meta has been doing the work I do, which is, by the way, working in the trust and safety space. We try to make the platform safer for everyone. Um, अगर मैं पाकिस्तान में या साउथ एशिया में कोई प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व करना चाह रहा हूँ, someone somewhere else, some other market, यूक्रेन में, पैलेस्टाइन में, कहीं ना कहीं किसी ने वो प्रॉब्लम पहले सॉल्व की हुई है. So one of the things I had to learn was how to see what has already been done and try to replicate it or improve upon it. So those are the kinds of things I started learning early on, and the
Right,
training was
right.
pretty comprehensive.
And talk a little bit about like Singapore. How is it working in Singapore, and how is that different from San Francisco? Considering San Francisco, it's got Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and now Singapore,
Yeah,
have all these like big tech companies. So I'm sure
yeah,
like in some way the atmosphere, it's obviously not exactly like San Francisco, but similar,
yeah.
right? So how have you found it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do miss SF. I had a great time there. The weather, the place, it's an amazing place to be. And I really wanted to be in SF because my college East Coast पे था, Philadelphia के पास. I wanted to be experience what the West Coast would be like. And it's a very laid back, very chill place. But you see the Silicon Valley culture in San Francisco. आप किसी कैफे में बैठे होते हो और आपको आवाजें आ रही होती हैं कि कोई entrepreneur अपना startup pitch कर रहा है, कोई VC किसी के साथ deal कर रहा है. The billboards will have like आम शहरों में a billboard would advertise something like a shampoo or a soap or a consumer product. San Francisco made the billboards would be this like data management company, some AI advanced company. So you see all of that. I do think I'm enjoying my time in Singapore more than I did in SF. Part of it has to do with just me having more time. The PGT role was really, really busy. I don't think I had as much time to build a relationship with the city, to experience the city the way I do now. The other part is that there's a sense of relative permanence कि अगर मैं यहाँ पे आया हूँ सिंगापुर में, I'm here for a few years, 2 3 4 साल, well indefinitely for now, but San Francisco में था के कभी भी जाना पड़ सकता है, so you don't build the same relationship. I also feel like I'm not fully experiencing the Singapore work culture. So when people ask me what's it like to work in Singapore, I feel like the work culture I'm experiencing is very much an American or a global company. My team is kind of from all over the world. My manager is based in Ireland, is Irish. The people I work with are from across the world. The company culture is not the typical Singapore culture, which I've heard is pretty harsh, pretty long hours, very hierarchical, FaceTime wala culture hai. So I'm personally not experiencing it, so I'm not the best person to speak about it. It's a very seamless place to move into. That was my expectation about both Dubai or anywhere in the Middle East, really.
Yeah.
Riyadh, mein, Abu Dhabi, and Singapore. It's a very expat-friendly place, very seamless place to move into. As an expat, aate ho, and the people are very used to expats coming in and out of the city. So the friend groups don't feel clicky. Log bachpan se ikatthe nahi. At least the people I'm friends with are all people who have like come into Singapore in the last 3 4 5 years. And they're very used to people coming in and out. So it was very easy for me to make friends. और उस हिसाब से it's a very open place. So I've loved my time in Singapore. शुरू में मुझे होता था कि it doesn't feel like the way New York would feels like the center of the world for finance, or the way San Francisco or the Silicon Valley feels like the mecca of technology. Singapore does sometimes feel like it's a satellite office. It's a regional place. But I feel like it doesn't really matter. Like I know that for at least my company, it's the APAC headquarters, and that's the region I'm focusing on. So that's the place for me to be at.
Well, definitely. And again, like the region that we are in, considering South Asia, Middle East, and now Singapore as well. I feel like Singapore again comparatively is quite ahead, in tech like space. Definitely. Now, obviously, like they have 2030 vision for Riyadh, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, great. Right. So, I mean, I'm glad you're having a good time here. Talk a little bit about your semester at Oxford. How was that,
Yeah.
and how did that happen?
I actually see some of my friends from my semester abroad in the list. Hi, Shiza. I think it was the best 3 or 4 months of my life. And that's a big thing to say, but I really, really enjoyed my time at Oxford. And I think most of it had to do with just me going in as a tourist for 4 months rather than as a student. Okay, my GPA didn't matter. I had a job lined up by that point. Um, and I just wanted to, और मुझे भी था कि सिर्फ 4 महीने है मेरे पास, and I wanted to make the most of every single hour of every single day. And you just don't have the same approach when you're in a college for 4 years. आपको होता है कि अच्छा अगले हफ्ते कर लेंगे, कोई प्लान बाद में कर लेंगे. But वहाँ पे I really wanted to experience all that Oxford had to offer, and there's a lot that Oxford has to offer. Some आप भूल जाते हो कि it's a actual functioning world class university. You think it's a bunch of lakes and gardens and castles and 800-year-old libraries. So I really, really enjoyed my time at Oxford. Going to the Oxford Union, listening to people like Malala ka interview tha wahan pe, Imran Khan ka interview tha, the best chefs across the world. There was a lot to do in Oxford. Um, Academically, I thought it was easier compared to Swarthmore. Um, and that was a little bit surprising to me. Because the way my classes worked was that I was taking 2 classes. Both of them were tutorials, which means that it was a one-on-one class with me and the tutor. So he would give me essay prompts. I would go and do the readings, write my essay, and then we would discuss my essay one-on-one. And the lectures would be separate. और उस तरह की setting में you would expect कि एक one-on-one setting में there's like a lot of attention to what I've done. My tutor can really scrutinize what I've written. But I felt that the expectations they had of me were kind of lower than what my professors at Swarthmore had. And I was learning a lot from the discussion I was having with my peers in my classes at Swarthmore, compared to what I did at Oxford. And that kind of like to me showed the quality of the American education, because
Mhm.
Swarthmore is by no means the best place in the US, but Oxford very likely is one of the best places in the UK. So it was time for me to talk. I'm glad I went to Swarthmore and
Great.
did my degree from there. But I loved Oxford otherwise.
Nice,
I do
nice.
miss it.
Were you a part of Oxford Union? Did you do any debates there?
No, I didn't do any debates there. I'd attended a lot of the speeches and the debates there, but I didn't do any debates in Oxford. I had left like debates by that point.
Okay, fine, no worries. Great. So now I'd be opening the floor for a Q&A session, and before that, I would share a few links. This is the school community, which is free. So this is for the audience, basically. You guys can join in for the freebies and free resources, and we also have a newsletter to subscribe to that. Now moving on, Sannan is right here. If you guys have any questions, from him, type it into the chat box, or you could unmute yourselves and ask. Fazan has a question. Fazan, you can unmute yourself.
Salam, Sanan. Thanks for the session. I had 2 questions. Number one, because I am also mainly in the consulting industry, and though you enjoy a lot, there are a lot of smart people. The life is really fancy, but in terms of it being a sustainable career, like what is your opinion on it? And secondly, how do you measure your weekend life? So for example, आप घर आते हो, आप सोचते हो कि I could have done these things better in my job. But how do you plan your weekend, and how do you make most of it?
Yeah. On the first part about consulting being a sustainable thing, personally for me, what I was doing at PJT was, even though PJT itself is an investment banking advisory firm, my role was more similar to consulting than it was to banking. And I always thought of consulting as a transitionary thing. कि अभी मैं college से graduate हो रहा हूँ, I will start my career off with something that gives me a lot of transferable skills. That's a nice brand name. That's general enough where I can do it for a few years and then pivot into something that I find more interesting and want to build a career out of. So even though I loved my time in consulting, and all of my friends, when they talk to me about what they do in consulting, I find the work intriguing. For me, I never thought of it as something that I want to do forever or build a career out of. Like I didn't want to like be an analyst, associate, and like director, partner at McKinsey, BCG, वगैरह. But I do still think it's a great place to start off at. UK, it opens the doors for you to a lot of other places in a way that even tech doesn't. So I feel like if you're working at a nice consulting firm, it's much easier for you to go to a technology company versus doing it the other way around. You could be working at the best technology company in the world, but consulting companies will not just like automatically take you. They will still like put you through all of their rigorous checks. Um, so I don't know what kind of consulting you're doing. We can speak more about it. But I personally thought it's just a stepping stone when I was thinking about consulting. My weekend life, you're saying you when you are in your weekend, you're thinking of मैं अपने हफ्ते में और क्या-क्या कर सकता था. I now have a bit more time in my weekends than I used to, and which is why I'm doing stuff like this. When I was at PJT, I didn't have time to do any side quests, is तरह की चीजें, because Sunday was basically another work day. I was working for like 5 to 6 hours on a Sunday. Friday को मेरा काम 7-8 बजे खत्म होता था, so all I really had was the Saturday. And that was, खाना बनाने के लिए, घर साफ करने के लिए, meeting my friends if I could on the Saturday. So I really didn't have a lot of time to do stuff on the weekends, and that felt odd. I didn't want it to be like that. Now I'm trying to do like these little side quests, trying to just keep my contacts active. अगर कोई मेरे से reach out कर रहा है, just making sure if I want to exit into something else, I know what's going on around the world. And that's how I try to make the most of my Saturdays. I'm also like a bit complacent now, where I also make time for squash and like other things I enjoy.
Great. Right. So do we have another question in the chat box? किसी का भी कोई सवाल है, they can just like write in. And Acha, I also just wanted to know, since now you're in tech, right? So what's next? Like, what are the exit options like for this particular, space?
Yeah. I feel like I'm still too new to this space to be thinking of exit opportunities, and I wouldn't have said the same thing for PJT, because at PJT I was thinking of exit opportunities at the 8-month mark. क्योंकि मुझे पता था कि मैं उस niche industry में अपना career नहीं बनाना चाहता. But with this, I potentially do see myself within the broader internet safety, social media safety space as a career. And there's so much to do in there. So what I do right now is a very operational role where we like do take down content, but there's the policy team that thinks of what should and should not be allowed on social media platforms. There are detection teams that look at how networks work, like a terrorist network, a child abuse network, a scam center just in Cambodia or Vietnam. So there's like a lot of other things you can do within social media. You could be the expert on how any abuse area, how hacks work, and then you go and disrupt it. So I could be doing all of this within Meta, or I could go and do the same thing at Reddit, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and so forth. And then there's like a lot of adjacent things that I can also do. So when I think of people on my team who have left recently, उनमें से कोई Meta के अंदर payment processing की team में जा रहा है. अगर WhatsApp पे payments process करनी है, there's a product that we offer, and they're the ones doing the project management for those things. कोई legal regulatory issues में जा रहा है, कोई public policy team में जा रहा है that's dealing with what the governments expect of us. And all of those spaces seem really interesting to me. So I feel like for me, I would want to stay within this larger space and see what it has to offer. Public policy is really interesting to me. That's what I've wanted to do for a while. And that's an important role.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like I remember you making, videos back in 2021. They were around that topic as well. Yeah. So are you like, even though like, now you're working in like risk management and, like sort of working on sort of controlling terrorism and all, is this public policy still in some way like part of it? Obviously, I think you're making policies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's always a part of it, because we're very, very closely working with governments, because we're balancing, on the one hand, freedom of speech, platform पे क्या क्या चीजें allowed होनी चाहिए
Mhm.
versus government हमसे क्या expect कर रही हैं. So we're always working with public policy teams across the world, because often it's our priorities are sometimes aligned with what the governments want. उसको ध्यान रखना पड़ता है.
Interesting, great. We have a question from Khatija. Khatija, would you like to unmute yourself or should I just go ahead reading it? So she's asking what key skills or certifications would someone need to work as a cybersecurity expert at a company like Meta, and would a background in networking or coding be more useful?
So I don't do cybersecurity. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, and that's a very different role, which I feel like you would need very specific cybersecurity related expertise. There's like digital forensic expertise and certifications that you would probably have to get. Coding, I think, for a role like that would be a plus. If you're asking the things that I do, I feel like it's a very, I would say, soft skills focused role. So things like, can you navigate ambiguity? Can you learn new things? Can you find patterns? Can you make processes efficient? It's a very operational role. कि जो चीजें हम इतने सालों से कर रहे हैं, can we keep finding efficiencies and ways to improve it? And it's a very like broad thing to do, but people who are like into consulting would understand. आप सोचते हो okay, हम अगर कोई project take on कर रहे हैं, and that's kind of the work I would do. I would be told कि अगले 6 महीने के लिए you are working on frauds and scams. And then it's kind of on me कि मैंने सोचना है कि within the broader fraud and scam space, क्या चीज priority है? Is that a project worth solving? What should the solution be? Go and execute it. Do the impact evaluation of that project. And that kind of comes all the way down to you. So having a sense of how to like take a massive problem statement, break it down into very executable steps, and then go and do the execution and then document it in the correct way is, I feel like, a really important skill. But it's very hard to show that skill off in an interview, because it doesn't like very easily come off in interview questions the way something like your finance skills, like do you understand the 3-statement financial model? It's a very easy thing to say. But the more soft skills are harder to convey in an interview. And I feel like that's where interview practice comes in really handy. Coding, the way I do it, I use a lot of internal AI tools to do my coding. It's more actually like data analysis related coding as opposed to like software coding. But for a cybersecurity role, you would have to code.
Right. We have another question who's asking how much are Pakistani institutions like PAST, NAST recognized abroad in terms of bachelor's completion?
So in the 2 industries that I've worked at, I feel like the America ke andar consulting or finance mein, it's tough to break in if you haven't already studied there. Because even as someone who is an international student in the US, it's incredibly competitive. It's incredibly competitive to begin with. When I was applying to PJT, there were like 1,300 applicants for 8 positions. और उसके अंदर they're often filtering by उनके target schools कौन-कौन से हैं, किन schools से कितने लोग उन्होंने लेने हैं. So it's hard to do that to begin with. And I feel like in that space, America mein, it's tough. A lot of my friends, what they do is they use Singapore, Dubai, Riyadh as a stepping stone, and then make their journey to the UK or Europe or the US. And in all of those places, I think all of these universities that you've mentioned are well recognized. In fact, some of my colleagues are from either FAST or NUST at Meta in Singapore. And they've also worked at places like Uber in Dubai, the great global companies, well-recognized companies. And I think increasingly, employers are looking at skills instead of the brand name of the university. So I think there is definitely room.
Perfect. Great. Right. I feel like we do not have any more questions. If someone has any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
And just to add on that, I will say sometimes if you're from a university that you think is not as well recognized, you might have to do more networking work than someone from a more recognized university would, just to get your resume through the door. Because there's not going to be any difference in the qualifications or your ability. It's just that the HR department would be like, we haven't hired anyone from this university before. Should we take a chance or should we not? Or जब वो सवाल आएगा, if you have a referral, if you have someone to recommend you and put your name through the door, that's going to benefit you.
Right. Thank you for mentioning it. Zen, please feel free to ask, unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. So, Saran, I just wanted to know how did you go about getting a referral? When we reach out to someone, have a conversation. I'm assuming you don't really ask them for a referral in the first conversation, right? How do you maintain that connection after building it,
Yeah.
and then how exactly do you ask for a referral? At what stage and at what kind of layers? Like, I'm assuming you won't go to someone who's probably at an upper level, like a director or a
Mhm.
head, and ask them, right? You would go someone who's associate manager at max senior manager, right? So could you please talk a bit about that? And secondly, when it comes to behavioral interviews, I understand lots of preparation and practice really helps, but in case you come across a question which you really don't know answer about, how do you go about that? Do you try to make up something right there and then, or do you just be upfront about that?
I would always be upfront about it. Depends on how much you back yourself to like spin the question in the way you've already prepared, but it's always better to be upfront about it. Whoever is interviewing you has interviewed dozens of other people like you, if not more. They can usually look past any, BS that you're trying to do. So it's always nice to be like, either say I will get back to you and genuinely do write them an email about it. If they say, "Ki haan, theek hai, get back to me on this," almost always they will be like, "Acha, theek hai, koi baat nahi." They will just move on to the next question, and they will appreciate the honesty. They want to see the best side of you, and if you feel like it's better to avoid the question and not say something that's not going to reflect well, I think just do that. On the referrals, let me like take it separately for consulting and tech. For tech, I think it's completely fine to just ask for a referral in the first conversation. Um, I asked for a referral for my meta position and I got a referral, but then I was rejected when I applied. And then I applied for the same position again. मैंने कहा मतलब अभी भी job portal पे है, so I will just apply again. And I applied for the same position with the same email, with the same resume, and got the interview when I applied without the referral.
Wow.
And the takeaway from that story is not that referrals don't work. The takeaway is that just keep at things and don't lose hope. Because referrals, like broadly speaking, do work. मुझे नहीं पता उस case के अंदर क्या हुआ था, but referrals do work. And the person was happy to give me a referral. He asked me a few questions about why I was interested, what my application was like. Obviously, job ko referral de raha hai, they want to make sure they're not just like handing out referrals to everyone. So you want to like put your best foot forward. You want to be forthcoming in your communication. You want to be impressive as an individual in your communication, which means कि आपका resume well formatted हो, आपका message आपने तरीके से लिखा हो. या अगर आप कॉल कर रहे हो, you sound like you're genuinely curious. You've like researched as much as you can about the industry before reaching out to them. For tech, I think that's fine. For consulting and finance, I do think it's best to work your way up to the senior people. So when you're in college, start with the analysts, start with your seniors who have done an internship or have just graduated and are working as like an entry-level position at consulting or finance companies. Or oftentimes they will be happy to give you a referral. It's probably better if someone relatively senior does it. But you also don't want like a partner. Okay, it will be hard to get a partner. The partner will not be able to do a personalized recommendation. If it's an analyst, they can probably like write an email to the HR person, send them a message. I don't know how the partners would do it, or if they would like even take the time out to do it. Even when they tell you that they will give you a referral, they might not. It's nice if someone like a VP or director or someone at that level does it. When you're going about networking, start with someone junior. Ask them to put you in touch at the end of your call. Ask them to put you in touch with someone else. So this like cycle of your networking keeps going on, and kind of like snowballs off of the first conversation. They connect you with someone else, and they connect you with someone else. So keep that going. When people reach out to me, I often know what the call is about. If they want a referral, I appreciate if they say that upfront. Often people when they say it in like subtle terms like I will let you know when I submit my application or something. Like when they hint at the fact that they want a referral, I will often like initiate the thing myself and be like, I'm happy to give you a referral. If someone doesn't do that, I think it's okay to ask at the end of your first conversation, because oftentimes people would rather you say what you want rather than asking for another call, taking up more of their time, and then asking for it. So people have done this enough times in the past where they're okay to give you a referral, especially at places where they have structured referral programs. For example, Meta can there's like a portal where I can like put in people's names and give referrals. अगर थोड़ा सा informal structure है, where the referral is a senior person talking to the hiring manager, talking to to HR, वहाँ पे the reputation of the person who's referring is a bit more on the line as compared to places that have more structured referral programs. And over there, you really want to make sure the person has faith in you, is really backing you, is impressed by you. And that can happen in the first conversation. But I think it's completely fine to ask for a referral at the end of your first call.
Right. Great.
I have a quick follow-up um, question regarding that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Oh,
so just out of curiosity, how did you end up choosing this particular team? Because there's a bunch of other non-technical roles, there's product, there's project management, there's data and all. How exactly did you end up shortlisting this role? And one more thing, so can we assume that at places like Singapore or even Dublin, these big tech companies are almost always open to sponsoring your work visa if you're not based there, if you're based
um,
outside in place like Pakistan?
for the first question, the honest answer is that's the role that was open when I was applying. I had just ended my job in the US, and this was like July, August of 2024. This was one of my first few applications. My fourth application was time pay, and it was the first offer I got. And I was like, it's good enough. I think I will enjoy the work. So I did it. Um, I wouldn't say you can assume that they will always be open to doing it. I think it's very, very role specific. In fact, at least in Singapore, they will often say that they would prefer to hire a domestic worker as opposed to an international worker. So, and in order for them to hire someone not based in that jurisdiction, they have to make a business case to the government often. कि हम किसी और मुल्क से एक employee को क्यों लेके आना चाह रहे हैं. They have like quotas that they need to meet, quotas of domestic students that they need to hire, domestic workers that they need to hire. So I wouldn't always assume that.
So how do we figure out by talking to people in those teams?
Yes. So you see if other international workers are working in that team, you speak to the hiring manager if you can, or the HR person if you can. Or like tech companies में आमतौर पे HR person का नाम लिखा होता है in the LinkedIn job posting or the job portal job posting. You speak to them and you talk within the team के कौन सी teams में international लोगों को आमतौर पे लेते हैं.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This was helpful.
right. So we will be taking two more questions, and then after that we'd be wrapping up. First question is from Asia Abed. Asia, would you like to come on call? Like, would you like to unmute yourself, or should I just read out your question? Okay, I'll just read it out. What's your take on online degrees, especially bachelor's and master's programs offered by the UK and US universities?
I will say we are still a few years away from online degrees and online courses being widely accepted. Because I feel like even though they teach you the skills you probably need, the function that traditional universities serve, and probably the more important function, is signaling value or signaling capability. And I'm not saying that the signal is correct, but that's how the industry works, where for the hiring manager, for HR, it's an easier decision to make if they have someone from a well-recognized university to hire someone like that. It's a decision they can defend. अगर कोई उनसे पूछेगा कि आपने इस बंदे को क्यों हायर किया, they will just be like, मतलब ये MIT गया था, or something like that. As opposed to someone who probably has the skills but doesn't have the traditional brand name to back it up. I'm not sure what kind of online degrees you're referring to. If it's like, मुझे नहीं पता ये क्या courses हैं, But that's my broader take on this. I feel like we're still a few years away from skills and capabilities being more valued than the brand names. But I do see us moving towards that, where people design tests that can test your capability and just focus on that as a process of hiring people as opposed to आप किस यूनिवर्सिटी में गए थे.
Right. Last question from Hania. Hania is asking, were there any specific courses or certifications that helped you in your current role at Meta?
I don't think so, because what I did before Meta was completely not related to my current role. I also didn't do any certifications. My courses, I would say, my PJT experience or my degree in economics and political science helped me the way it would have helped me for any other job, for a consulting position, because it helped me give me very general skill sets, which means when it's all about data analysis out there, I know how something about how policies work. I can, connect connect with various different teams. If I'm speaking to a bunch of lawyers, I can hold my own. If I'm speaking to the finance team, I can still have the conversation with them. I feel like that's how it helped me, but no specific courses or certifications.
Great. Right. So we will be ending. Zan has another question. Would you like to take like a few more questions? Ek Hamza ka
Sure.
if you have 5 minutes,
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Zan.
Thank you, Sannan. I just wanted to quickly get your opinion on so going to a place which is not really well known. Talking about bachelor's or master's degree in the US, especially with the upcoming rules that H1B might be wage based. Can you please talk a bit about how is it like coming from a college which might not have been one of the target schools? How hard
Yeah.
was it to break into these roles? How much extra effort did you have to put into networking and all?
Yeah. I used to worry about this before I went to the US. Okay? It's not a college I have ever heard about. मेरे खानदान में भी किसी ने नहीं सुना था Swarthmore के बारे में. It's not a college that I thought I could brag about. But when I actually got there and I realized what the liberal arts program is all about, I figured out that it's actually very, very competitive. If you look at things like acceptance rates, it's up there with any of the IVs. And the people who are making decisions about hiring or about admissions, thinking of grad schools and PhD programs, they did know places like Swarthmore, Williams, Amherst, Pomona, Haverford, Bryn Mawr, etc., any of the liberal arts colleges, and were really, really well respected. Maybe even more so than some of the bigger universities, because they knew that all of these colleges were really, really rigorous academically. If you want to go down the academic route, I feel like liberal arts colleges are up there, if not even more well liked for grad schools and PhD programs. I do think it's tougher for people who've gone to not the traditional target schools when trying to break into places like tech, finance, consulting, partly because they're not the traditional target schools, and partly because you're not going to have as many alumni to connect to and find your network at the place. However, I did think it was easier, like when I did find an alumnus to connect with, they were much more willing to help me out, have a conversation with me, than I feel like someone at a bigger college would have been. Because with close knit network, alumni के साथ भी रहता है. So if anyone from my college reaches out to me now, I'm more than happy to speak to them, talk to them about what they want to do, give them a referral. क्योंकि वो connection मुझे लोगों ने help किया था, मैं उनको help करूँगा जो मेरे से छोटे हैं. So I didn't think it was too difficult for me, and I think I did get lucky as well. क्योंकि मेरा job application मेरी internship के through हो गया था. At the end of my internship, I got the return offer and I ended up staying with PJT. But I do think compared to NYU, Wharton, etc., it's a little bit harder.
So, do you think location, especially proximity to a major city, helps with that, especially in terms of
Yeah.
attending in-person networking events or maybe some conferences?
That's a great question. I think it does. And I think the location matters in a few ways. Ek toh, just from a social point of view, there will be more fun things to do, but also there will be more things catered towards students. So conferences, symposia, networking events that you can do. There will be like things at other universities that you can attend. Uska bahut fayda hota hai. You will connect with other students and learn what they're up to. So a lot of my friends were from colleges close to me. UPenn mein jo dost the, Drexel mein, Haverford mein. And that like expanded the pool of peers that I knew. Because mera college itna chota tha, I was able to connect with a lot of my other people. But I think most importantly, I was able to stay in my college but do things in Philadelphia. For example, when I was working for the mayor's office in Philadelphia, that's not something I could have done if I was not close to a big city. I was staying on my campus and then working for the mayor's office. Similarly, if you're like studying at, say, Georgetown, you have access to the best think tanks, the best foreign policy places in the world right next to you in DC. I do think it makes a big difference. Similarly, if you're like in, San Francisco, mein agar aap pad rahe ho, you have access to Silicon Valley. I think it makes a difference.
Last bit of this question. So, do you think a place like Scranton, which is I think almost 1.5 to 2 hours away from New York City, is a good place to be in if you're willing to put in effort in networking and traveling back and forth?
I think so. I think it'll be relatively tough, but then again, most of the things you will do will be during this winter break or the summer break. Aapki internships, externships, वगैरह. Us time pe you might want to be in New York itself, because a lot of what you will take out of these experiences will not be in your internship hours. It might be hanging out with your colleagues or with your bosses outside of work, at like a team event या इस तरह की किसी चीज पे. So you might want to make the most of the proximity. So अगर आप थोड़ा सा दूर हो, you make the most of it of your on college experience, and then when you're doing internships, I would suggest being in the bigger city.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. So we are now like going to end the session. Sannan, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them?
LinkedIn is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Let me put my LinkedIn down. Hamza is asking for it. And if anyone wants to have like a follow-up chat after what we discussed, I'm more than happy.
Great. Thank you so much, Sannan. Thank you for doing this. You had some great tips. It was such